right? There's no political agenda here. There's nothing political correct here, because what they're doing to our children is not correct.
Hi.
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
The adults that get paid as public servants, who took an oath, who said, I will make sure your babies are educated, I will make sure your kids are nurtured in the classrooms. That's what they said on paper. But in real time, our babies are coming home crying. Our babies are looking to us as their parents to make sure they are protected. And the problem is, the law says we must send them. Right? The Constitution says our children are entitled to a free and appropriate education. But nothing in it that says that you have the right to put your hands on my babies. Nothing says you have the right to drag my babies, to sexually assault them, to deny them a quality education.
Hello, and welcome to Article 8 with Gwen Samuel. And I am your host, Gwen Samuel. So some of you may be asking, so who am I? I'm just a mom doing my part to protect children. So this show will always be dedicated to protecting the educational rights of children. Now you also may be asking, what is Article 8? Article 8 refers to Connecticut's Constitution as it relates to education. And the state says elementary and secondary should be free. But if we extend that a little further, the Supreme Court ruled in 2010 that an education is not just supposed to be free, but it must be of a standard of quality that a child can graduate with the skills that he or she needs to access employment opportunities and or higher education, which includes our technical schools. And we must say, ladies and gentlemen, as I recently looked at the suspension and report rates from a report from the State Department of Education last night, that we are failing our children. And I'm not just saying that as a slogan. We have resulted to suspending children as young as pre-kindergarten up to second grade. And we're talking suspensions out of school. So I'm torn between wanting to just jump into all the negative things that are happening in our state, but I have such an awesome guest today, a young writer that has dispelled all myths, right, about what young women can do in the world of journalism, in the world of writing, in the world of social media. And I'm so excited to present my guest shortly. So just so we're clear, every week I will have a special guest, and each guest will build upon the solution building process to ensure that every child has access to safe and quality schools. And I also want to be clear that this mom doesn't negotiate at all when it comes to the safety, education, and overall well-being. And we should be able to learn from one another through this show and working with each other with parents in the community and community leaders to protect children. Because if we don't, who will? And that is real talk. If we don't rise up for children, who will? So momentarily, I'm about to introduce my guest. Her name is Megan DeSambra. I met her a few years ago when she was covering some education. I read some education blogs, and I got to meet her. And it was refreshing to see someone that's a little bit older than my daughter, I'm thinking, right? I'm looking at her saying, this could be my daughter writing the narrative for our community. So I felt it was only appropriate that we bring her on the show, because we need to build relationships with reporters and journalists and those who are writing our narrative. Because if we don't control our narrative, the status quo will control it. And when they write about it, for some reason, it is always doom and gloom, especially when it comes to Black and brown children and Black and brown parents. And so I thank Megan for always presenting balanced stories. But let her tell you more about her. So I'm going to, before we go into our commercial break, I will introduce you to Miss Megan DeSambra. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be here on your show, because you're one of my heroes, actually.
All right, so we are sheroes today. So I learned that when we're in the studio, think of it as our living room. So let us just relax,
All right.
have conversations, knowing that everything we'll talk about is to inspire our listeners, inspire young women who will see this show, who will see young women like you of all colors saying, wait a minute, I can be a journalist too. I can be a blogger. Mm-hmm. So before we get started, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a New Jersey native originally. I came to Connecticut about 5 years ago. After graduating college, I went to school at Ramapo College for history. So journalism was like not something that I had originally planned on getting into. And certainly if someone had told me about, 10 years ago, they were like, oh, you're going to start a blog. I'd be like, oh, you're nuts. I can't write. Like I could never do that. So I kind of got into it in a very, roundabout way through advocacy.
Oh, okay, great.
What happened was after college, started working in politics. During college, I had gotten involved in political campaigning and activism. And then, so I worked at that for a few years. And then I was tired of being away from my boyfriend at the time. Mm-hmm. So I ended up following him to Connecticut. So I got here because of a boy.
Okay. Welcome to the world, right? Being a woman, a young woman at that, right? Mm-hmm.
And I ended up moving to Bridgeport, which was an amazing place. I come to find out, but I very quickly started reading the news about education and what was going on in the schools there, and getting angry. Mm-hmm. And from that anger, I noticed that there was some voices missing in that conversation. There was bloggers who were writing from the teacher's perspective, and there was the traditional news media, but no one was talking to parents. Right. And there was a lot of things that were going on. Actually, it relates to like there was a principal who dragged a student, so it relates kind of to the OCA report that
so there was a case of abuse that had occurred, and you saw that. Mm-hmm.
And there was just a lot of, things going on at the board level where, either parents weren't being informed.
Right.
And when this happened in Bridgeport, actually the parent whose child was the victim in this case didn't know. So when I found out about this stuff, I was like, all right, I'm not really doing anything right now. Maybe this is something that I should, start writing about. Why not? And I had blogged out in, because I had worked on political campaigns out in the Midwest for a little while, mm-hmm. and I had done some blogging there. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I should write about this. And it started out kind of from the place of anger. Like I was just really upset about what was going on in my community. And I wrote a few posts, and then I wrote a few more, and it turned into kind of this bigger thing. And I started out as Education Bridgeport. And about a year ago, I decided to expand that to Education Connecticut.
Well, I'm glad you decided to expand, because then now you're able to cover our voices from across the state. And that is why I gravitated to you, because I'm looking at this young, fresh voice, giving a voice to a different population, right? And so I appreciated that. And then I also appreciate the young community rising up to tell the story. And so, and it's interesting, because I remember, and correct me, I remember when I was speaking with you, you talked about, you had a learning disability. And so, and I thought that was important to share, because we talk about learning disabilities as a stigma, like there's something wrong. Mm-hmm. And then I'm noticing in the students that are being pushed out, they're your special education, but we're not thinking about our gifted and talented. So clearly, now I'm not even going to call it a disability. How about we just call it a different ability?
A different
right?
ability.
So
like
because
that.
you had a different ability, right, you were able to tap into the world of writing. And when you think about advocacy, most people that are advocates or activists are moved by something, right?
Yeah.
Their emotions or their passions, if you will, kind of charge them to want to do something. Sometimes you don't know what to do. You just know you need to do something. So I think as I hear your story, you know, you're just moved to Bridgeport. You're seeing all these great people in Bridgeport, right? You're seeing great students and parents, and I'm sure you even met great teachers. But then
Yeah.
along that journey, right, you're seeing some things that don't look quite right for to protect the rights of children. So I'm grateful that you followed your passion and became a blogger. And so I tweeted on and I put on Facebook that you are a blogger for the people.
For the people.
For
I saw
the
that.
people.
I try.
Yes,
I
so
try.
I appreciate that. So we are about to go into a commercial break. When we come back, I would like to jump right in to our next segment. So thank you very much. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
These are the monsters of the road. Ever drive alongside a tractor trailer in the rain? Scary. You're hoping they don't change lanes. Now they see you, now they don't. This monster can crush you in an instant. They may be insured for millions, but you're not thinking of that in a dangerous situation. I'm attorney Jeffrey Dresden. Have an accident, you know what to do. Because this is what we do. 24/7, 11/22.
Welcome back to Article 8 with Gwen Samuel. And again, I am your host, Gwen Samuel, a mom who cares about children. I'm here today with a young journalist who brings a fresh perspective to a very male-dominated industry, the world of writing, the world of public media, the world of social media. And so I brought her here today because we have young daughters, right? I have a young daughter. Some of you in social media land and TV land have young girls, right? And sometimes our children don't get to see the various industries that they can pursue. And so I was very impressed with Megan DeSambre, a young woman who's a writer out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. And so we are going to jump back into the conversation. So, Miss Megan, so I was thinking about your world, and I know what it's like just being a woman in the industry of public policy, and I'm not even from the lens of I work in it, right? I'm a consumer of education. My children attend, and I know what it feels like to be in a room full of men. And in my world, right, predominantly white men, right? And so there's this, sometimes it can be intimidating. So I'm wondering, from your perspective as a young woman in this world of journalism and writing and blogging, what has your experiences been like?
So definitely intimidating, especially going at this not necessarily with a background in journalism and not knowing quite what to expect. A lot of times I do walk into the room and I'm like the only female in the room, especially when it comes to talking to politicians, because a lot, there's not a lot of representation for women. So it has been kind of difficult navigating that, and even doubly so being a person with a learning disability.
Right.
Because I think this is something that a lot of people who have been, labeled special ed or have learning disabilities is, there's this ingrained feeling like you can't.
Right.
And it's, and I don't want to trace that back to anything in particular, but I think it's just been like, because you learn differently and the world works differently, there's this kind of taboo, as you were talking about, and the feeling like, oh, you can't. So it's been very difficult to kind of go into these rooms and try to project like, yes, I'm a blogger, but I'm also here to tell a story and be taken seriously. So there's like, it's kind of layered in that way.
Well, it's just interesting because, when I first met you, I just I'm going to keep saying that. I just so appreciate that, because the children that need their voices heard, the communities that are marginalized and disenfranchised, right? We need media to help tell our stories. There are many organizations, the status quo in Connecticut, and when I say the status quo, let me be very clear, I'm talking about the existing structure, how things run, how things navigate. And those with lots of money and the ability to organize control other people's narrative. And so without individuals like you, Megan, that are listening to both sides of the story, you're giving those that need a voice the most a voice, a platform to speak, a platform to share. And for that, I am so appreciative. All right, so then as I think about your journey, and the world that I'm in is in the world of parents, right? I'm not here to try to save anyone. I don't have a heaven or hell to put anybody in, okay? And so, but at the same time, we have to, as parents and community leaders, become more organized and rise for children.
Yes.
So that when these things of abuse that occur in this Office of the Child Advocate's report, I mean serious abuse, right? When we got foster care children that are in the systems and those that are in limbo waiting for a family, they need someone to rise for their, for them.
Yes.
So if you had any pointers or tips, or just based on your journey, what would you say to us parents? Where do we need to be? Do we need to be at the state capitol based on what you're hearing? Do we need to be at the boards of ed? Based on your lens. And I understand you don't have any children, which makes this a fresh perspective, right? So we're getting it from a place of a journalist.
So I think that perspective is very important. And that's kind of why I do what I do. I don't really necessarily view it as just straight journalism, but advocacy journalism, which is something that I think is extremely important.
I love that. Advocacy journalism.
Yes, advocacy journalism sometimes gets downplayed because it's not objective, but it's truth-based. Because I believe that the truth isn't necessarily objective.
All right, Miss Megan, you just gave me goosebumps with that one. Okay, that's right.
I think, and that's kind of why I write about parents, and I write from the perspective of someone who sees education in the system in Connecticut as something that needs to be fixed and reformed. Something that because there really is inequality in the system. So I'm not coming from the perspective of someone who necessarily is looking and saying that, everything's unbiased. No, there's a problem and we need to talk about it. And I think the people who need to talk about it most are the people who are most affected by it. So that's the parents and the students. And unfortunately, they're the ones not in the room. Right. So if I had to talk to a room full of parents and tell them, what they can do, where they need to be, well, I think they need to be everywhere. And the unfortunate fact is that, I sometimes go to public hearings and there's 2 people in the room and they're not parents. I was at a budget hearing in Bridgeport, I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago. And this was a budget hearing on the school board budget for the city council. There was 2 people in the room.
Yeah.
And I think some of it is and I don't want to go all doom and gloom on this either, but I think there's a disconnect on what people know as well. Absolutely. Like there's not enough watchdogs out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Because I think people didn't know there was going to be a public hearing because they didn't realize that the process started way before the budget was adopted. Like the process started months before it needed to come out, but people within the community did not realize probably that there was a hearing in the first place.
Right.
And then they weren't in the room. Now, if they were in the room, they'd be able to tell the city council members, like, you need to look at schools and you need to make sure that schools are being taken care of. Now, recently in Bridgeport, this is the good thing is recently in Bridgeport, hundreds of people came out for a city council budget hearing and demanded that the city council do something about the school board budget and demanded that they fund the school board budget.
So what was different? So if we think about trends, right? Mm-hmm. So what happened that we went from 2 people in the room to 100 people? Because if there's something that we can learn, right? Yeah. Was there a group? Were there individuals? Was there more awareness? Was there more news coverage? Something shifted where it went from 2 to 100. Because I want to learn as a parent. I'm just, organic organizer. I think that's just who I am, right? And I always want to learn new tools. So did you see something different happen that resulted in that increased turnout?
So I think more information was definitely key in that. And there's also been a lot of groups recently who have been doing a lot of real grassroots work. I think the CT Core is one of them, Faith Acts for Education, right, who have been really going into the community, talking to people and doing the work. And as a result of that, more people are activated in the community, and more people who are activated and informed come to the table.
Absolutely. And
are able to really, say, put their voice out there. And so it's in that way, it's been slow, but it's starting to work in Bridgeport.
Right. So the key was getting the information out. So there was a more concerted, a very concentrated effort on getting the word out to individuals, helping them understand what is happening, the process. And that's really what grassroots is about. And I believe as communities, especially of color, I'm speaking from a place of a personal experience, that we've gotten a way of sharing information. And it was because someone shared the information about the state board, suspension and expulsions, I was able to respond and share with others. So we're about to go into another break. Join me momentarily as we continue our discussions about building power in our communities. See you soon.
I started skipping school at the age of 7. My mom didn't realize until she actually went to go pick up my notes. And she realized I was getting left back. After that, I started hanging out with the wrong crew. I ended up in jail 3 times. Parents, what I'm trying to say is keep on top of your kids. Make sure you call, make sure you do what you gotta do. You know, parents, school is important. It's a big deal.
Yo, I went all the way up to the 12th grade, you know, and I was skipping school. I was selling. I was out there doing bad things because I thought I could just get the fast way. My aunt knew. She came busting at me, came hitting, knocking me upside the head, telling me, you know, to stay in school because they told her, they called in. Parents, you know, you got to keep on top of your kids because at the end of the day, they got to stay in school for the future, for y'all and your family to grow. Stay in school, it's a big deal.
Welcome back to Article 8 with Gwen Samuel, and I am your host, Gwen Samuel, and I'm a mom on a mission for children. Just like many of you out there listening, either on your television, Channel 24, or on social media. And so I've had such an enlightening conversation with Megan DeSambra, an advocacy journalist. I love the term. And I just appreciate her lens as it relates to giving a voice to the marginalized populations, to our Black and brown communities, to our poor communities. I'm sure she's bipartisan and neutral, so she would give a voice to all that need to have one to cover a great story. But I do appreciate that she's very intentional, that she makes sure that she is allowing people to control their own narrative. So she does a lot of video blogging where she videos so that I don't have to speculate what a reporter is going to say about me. You can hear it from me. I think it should be nothing about us without us. And so as we go into our last portion of the show, I just wanted to put out a few reminders. Because one thing I appreciate what Miss Megan talked about was she talked about there was a city council meeting in Bridgeport where one time she looked at one, they only had 2 people. And the next time there was another city council meeting, there was 100 or so people. And I asked the question, what is it that was different? So if we're going to learn from one another, right? This show is a place that we also share information. So I asked Megan, so Miss Megan, what was different? And she said that there were actual people on the ground getting the word out. And that is why I am the founder of the Connecticut Parents Union. Even though this is the Gwen Samuel show, that is part of my journey. I'm the founder of the Connecticut Parents Union, and we fight for the rights of children. And we just recently did a training a few weeks ago so that we can get these skills, so that we can effectively advocate for information, advocate for our children, and be better and get better at information sharing, because people say knowledge is power. Knowledge applied is power. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not doing anything with it, then you just have knowledge. So we're going to go back to Miss Megan. So first I got to get this. Thank you so much. I'm just taking all this. I'm trying to take notes in my brain, right? Note to self, you know. So for our young people, because when I go home, I'm going to tell my daughter about, you had this great young lady on the show, and, you know, and our young people are using social media a great deal. And so, you know, of course we get nervous as parents. We want to make sure that they're using social media responsibly and responsibly. So what would you recommend to someone that wants to consider being a journalist, right? Because that does. Do you have to go to school to be a journalist, or?
So I mean, I started my blog. I'm, you know, I don't have a background in journalism. I kind of just started writing.
Right.
You know,
you write well,
I think if you have something to say, which
yes.
You know, students and parents have something to say, and your perspective is important. Their perspective is important. I would say to them that their perspective is important, to just start. to just start writing, even if it's for yourself at first, and then, put it out there. Now, as far as going into journalism at a traditional press or a traditional media outlet, usually you have to have a degree in journalism or you have to have experience. Now, I couldn't tell you whether, I couldn't really give you necessarily tips because I've never worked for a, print journalism, but definitely, if that's what your passion is and that's what your dream is, go for it. Because we need more young people, we need more women in journalism, we need more people of color in journalism because perspective matters.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. So as we prepare to close out on this show, I'm going to be giving some reminders and some updates. I'm so busy want to just keep talking to Megan. I forgot, I love you all, but I forgot I had an audience in front of me. So I wanted to give you some quick reminders for today because there are some actions that we can do today to protect children. Because while we're talking about journalism, I love what Miss Megan says, perspective matters. And right now, in less than an hour, more at 9:30, well, actually less than 15 minutes, there will be a State Board of Education meeting being held in Hartford at 450 Columbus Boulevard. It starts at 9:30 a.m. Please get there and sign up if you want to speak. Because they will be talking about that suspension and expulsion report. And so here's the problem. The majority of kids that are being suspended and expelled are Black children, Hispanic children, special needs children, which includes pre-K, pre-kindergarten up to second grade. And for the record, let us be clear, a law was enacted in July 1st, 2015 that says you cannot suspend pre-kindergarten children up to the second grade. I'm sure there's some mitigating circumstances that they could occur, but for the most part, we're not supposed to be suspending babies. And that's what they are, babies. So please join me up at the State Board of Education. If you don't want to speak, observe. Because if I think about what Megan is saying, get the information so that when we hold people accountable, we are very specific in what we're holding them accountable to. And so in this particular case, I'm looking at philanthropy, State Department of Education. Everywhere I turn, everybody has a conference happening about race and equity. It is the flavor of the month. Oh, we care about all children. Come to our conference. Yes, we are going to fund equity and justice. Yet everything that's happening, the majority of things that are happening to our children are not equity and clearly not justice. So we have to begin to hold institutions because we are paying. There are people, these schools are getting grants. They're getting federal funding to oppress our children. And you know who that is on? Us. So even though we do not understand all about politics, we're human beings. And children are little human beings. And they trust us to keep them safe. And we must do a better job at keeping them safe. Let's put this into a timeline. February 9, 2017, the Office of the Child Advocate issues a report saying that there's an alarming rate of abuse and neglect, including sexual abuse, happening in public schools. Pause. May 2017, a report of suspension and expulsion comes out. And we're suspending preschools. We won't suspend abusers who are hurting our children, who are molesting our children, who are dragging our children, slapping our children, putting our children in seclusive rooms. Babies are in rooms with no locks, urinating on themselves. Kids are going into the emergency room because of the restraints that are happening. But we won't suspend anyone. We don't want to arrest anyone. We don't want to make teachers mad. And I think this is beyond teachers. I think it's the leadership of teachers that are silent about their members hurting our children, yet we will suspend children. That is some food for thought. We won't suspend abusers, but we will suspend babies. Something's wrong with that picture. And because of this picture, I will be working with great leaders from across the state, parent leaders, and we will be holding a press conference next week and a little call to action So it'll be May 10th at 11 o'clock. Stay tuned for location. Because one thing I've learned, some things you got to keep to yourself until it's time to launch. So, but save the date. May 10th, 11 a.m. We will be holding a press conference and we will be calling names. We will be calling people to the carpet who are charged with keeping our children safe. And one thing we must remember, there was a lawsuit, it's still in place, CCJEF, the Connecticut Coalition for Education Funding for Justice, or Justice for Educational Funding. The judge ruled that the State Board of Education has the ultimate responsibility for Connecticut's children. I'm tired of the State Board of Education telling us it's because of local politics. Our hands are tied. We can't keep your children safe. But the law says the state has the ultimate responsibility for over 540-something thousand children. 40% of them are of color, and over 20% of them are trapped in schools that can't meet their needs. So join me up at the State Board of Education in a few minutes. And then let's prepare to organize to say that all children matter. We must have safe Connecticut schools now. And if we don't stand up for our children, who will? So until next time, join me next week, Wednesday, where I have a special guest, a former commissioner of the State Department of Education. And we will be talking about early childhood, and we will be preparing to organize to protect children. See you soon. Bye-bye.
So as I transition out, I promised myself I wouldn't get emotional. The reason why I'm getting it out the way now, because I will be a student with you. Because every day is a day of learning. This is a classroom. Life is a classroom. And this classroom ain't treating us too well. But I will say this, they do to us what we allow. Because you don't see suburban communities saying these same things. You better believe if a suburban mom thought you were thinking about dragging their baby, you won't have a job. And that's just thinking it. If I think you're not looking right at my baby, you're not going to have a job. But for us, they are saying we assault you, we hurt you, but you better have your baby back in our class on Monday.
My name is J. Stan McCauley, and I do business as Light Source Productions. I provide professional services in the area of strategic video communications. First, what we do is we help you craft your message using what I call the rule of the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. We do event documentation, content acquisition, full-scale productions, editing, and of course distribution through our social media television network. And with social media, video is more important now than it has ever been. Whether you're talking big business, small business, nonprofit, church, or just an individual. Let's say you're planning an event, a wedding, whatever the case may be. But let's say a big event, but no video. And you spent all this time, all these hours to put this event on, and maybe 100, 200 people attend the event. But more important than that is that thousands could attend by watching it on social media. But of course, you don't think about this until after the event is over. You can't afford not to capture it for social media. And despite what people think, I am affordable. Give me a call. Let's plan your next video project and share it with the world on my social media television network. I promise you that you will have the attention of one person, me.